these are philosophical questions and ones that we still wrestle with, and why art is still so relevant. And to paraphrase one of my favorite quotes, which we've talked about on the show, by Frederick Buechner, he says, art is one of the few places left where we can speak to each other of holy things, right? When we're so divorced from religion and spirituality to a large degree, it's just like, we still need to have places where we can talk about some way to talk about this stuff, right? To engage with these philosophical questions. And I think that we've stopped engaging with a lot of these things, and we've tried to fill that gap with, cars and streaming services and
This is Way of the Artist with Brandon Colby Cook and Evan Schulte,
exploring the challenges of the creative call
so that you can claim your own path
and make your life a work of art.
Welcome to the show, people. This is the show. Way of the Artist. Okay, well, today we're talking about big picture stuff. We don't really have a title just yet, but it will come in time. So the thing that we've been discussing, everything that we've been discussing seems to keep coming back to this big picture thing. And you go down this rabbit hole, or you look at something and you go, it's a bigger and a bigger and a bigger picture. And so what I'm kind of entering this idea with is that in our own lives, we only have such a small slice of the big picture of all that is the big, massive play that is life that's going on. And so our little slice becomes everything. It's so important to us, and it's the world to us. Yet we don't always see how it relates to the bigger thing and how it all connects. And I was thinking about this, actually. We just listened to some Alan Watts, which I'll give him a little shout out, about the artist. And how, we try to look at things like we might be looking at a branch, and then we forget that the branch is connected to the tree, and then the tree is connected to the forest, and the forest is connected to the mountain hill, and so on and so on, and it keeps getting bigger, right? And what we think is this one little thing we're looking at is so important, and it means so much, but it does. But not the way we think it does. I think what I'm realizing, this was something Evan just said, and it kind of, he's like, don't take that from me. But basically, our little piece of the pie actually connects to the big picture. And it's important that we see that and don't lose sight of that. Because it's actually where the meaning... I don't know. I'm losing it, but that's basically what I got. Okay, I'll pass it to you.
Oh God. Okay. Well, yeah, I feel like this is in some ways a theme that we've been almost exploring over the last couple of recordings and episodes that we've been doing. And also this thing of the bigger picture. I think that another way of looking at that as well is going deeper, which is very much like one artist thing is like, we've got to go deeper and deeper and deeper, trying to understand more of the truth of something, right? And I think that artists, like great artists, are always trying to communicate something big, something I dare say universal. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't think there are universal truths, but I think that there are definitely spaces where a large variety of human beings connect on something. Like we can connect on some pretty simple fundamental things like love, like that's and family and friendship, connection, like these are things that we all want and desire and cherish and things like that. So, and things well beyond that, but these are the kinds of things that I think that artists are trying to dig deeper into. And sometimes there's it can be through taking a spotlight onto some very specific thing, but it's usually always in service of trying to find something in that little thing that expresses something bigger, right? That expresses some big universal truth that we relate, because as we've talked about many times before, art is so much about connection, right? It's so much about connecting us as people. And I mean, I feel like we're in some general territory right now with this, because we're just like, well, we're thinking about just big picture, and we'll sort of figure out where that's going to go with us on this one in terms of exploring, finding the big picture or the importance of the big picture. I think that maybe the last thing I'll say before I hand it back off to you is, in our world today, people are so specialized in their fields, and there's a value to that. But we're also running into issues where people don't know how to talk to each other anymore, or people have such a hard time connecting or figuring out big problem things because everyone's so siloed in their own little area and not really bringing it together with others. So I think that's one of the things about the big picture stuff and the deeper picture stuff, is that I think that we run the risk of losing out on a very important conversation or dialogue, not just with others, but with ourselves. So I don't know if that gives you anything to jump off of, Brandon, because I know I just kind of said a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Well, let me take this in a bit of a different direction, just because
Do it.
I feel like this is one of those things where it's very easy to get lost in the whole thing, because as you're expanding out and trying to look at a bigger thing, you all of a sudden lose sight of the smaller thing. And I think that's why we like smaller, more like siloed things, because we feel we can control it, we can have a handle on it. Like if you're a specialist in some study of science, for example, you're like, well, I know everything about the liver. And it's like, no, everything, and so it's like, good, you can control that. That makes sense to you. But, maybe you don't know how the foot connects to the liver. And to you, that's woo-woo and it's not disconnected. And yet someone over in Eastern study is like, no, like if you touch this part on the foot, it actually is connected. You're going to feel it. There's a sense here. And so there's this kind of connectedness, and that can start to get quickly overwhelming, because we start to see, well, hey, everything's connected to everything, and where does it end? And
Yeah.
So I think there's an element of that we're trying to approach here. I also think that there's I think the value of this conversation comes in the sense that once you recognize something is connected to something that you didn't know was connected to it, it changes your perception and opens up your world. So one of the ones that I love, changed the game for me, and I always teach this to my clients, is the concept that, and this wasn't mine. I got this from one of the great speakers of the past. It was either like, I think it was like a Les Brown. I don't even know if Les Brown got it from somebody. The point is here's the saying: you don't get what you want, you get what you are. This is huge, because once you recognize this, it changes everything for you and makes everything all of a sudden just make sense. So you don't get what you want, you get what you are. So if you ask for something, you say, I want this thing in my life. I want massive success. I want to win an Oscar. I want whatever the thing is that you said that you want. The universe, God, however you want to look at it, your highest self, whatever it is for you, that little part of you that is your subconscious that you don't even know is acting, once you activate it, it goes, okay, that's what we're after. And then it goes, now we have to go get it. And it recognizes this higher form, this thing that you don't see as connected to everything, but it is connected to everything, and it has some type of connection whether it's aware or not or whatever, it's just innate. Who knows? I don't know where it comes from. The point is that it goes, you want this, now I'm going to make you this. So if you said, I want to be like, so for me, for example, when I was younger, I said, I want to be one of the greatest storytellers of our time, or I want to be the greatest storyteller of our time. These are things I would say over and over and over again. So my higher self, my God, the universe, whatever, goes, okay, let's make you a great storyteller. Do you think it just goes, okay, I'm going to just get you to sit down and write a book and then boom, all these perfect words will pour out of you? No, it doesn't work like that. The way it works is I'm going to put you through some fucking events. I'm going to break your heart. I'm going to show you things that most people never see. I'm going to take you on journeys across the world and back so that you can see these things and meet these people and do this stuff, because that's what a great storyteller is. And if that's what you want, that's what you will become. And so once you see that you are what you want, when you have this tough event happen in your life, instead of scorning it and being like, oh, why does this happen to me? Why is everything so tough? Remember what you asked for. Because you are the tree that is growing towards the sun. And you said the sun is over there, and so then the tree must find its way to the sun, and you are finding your way to what you want. So when something bad happens to you, don't look at it as bad. Look at it as a gift. This must be serving something I said I wanted. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten it. And some people, they go into this whole thing. It was like, well, that's woo-woo. That's like not really connected. Like, how do you know that? It's like, well, you know what? I don't. But here's the thing. It helps me live a good life, and it helps me not be fucking depressed when something bad happens. And you know what? At the end of the day, it actually is pretty true. If you look back at your life, you're going to find out that most everything you've ever had, actually it is everything, but you might not be able to see it all. But everything you have, it's because you became who was the person that would get it. You didn't just get it because you wanted it. And we know this, and here's further proof. We know this because ask the world for something you want that you aren't in line with. And good luck getting it. Good luck getting it. You know, like those people who go, oh, I'd love $1 million, but you don't ever believe you could be someone that has $1 million. Because you aren't willing to become a millionaire, you won't get $1 million. Because, do you see what I mean? You have to be before you get. And this is like it's like one more analogy. A tree that wants to provide shade can only provide as much shade as big as it is. Right? Let's just say that's what it wants to do. You can't nurture and take care of things with your shade until you grow into the thing that can create shade, right? So you can't ask to have the thing without being the thing. And once this mindset shifts in your head, everything that happens in this world is all connected, and you start to see it's all a big gift. You know, I mean, and I didn't come up with this idea. I just, this is something that I started to stumble across, and I started to realize everything is who I become. And even the bad shit I get, it's because of who I am. And and just face that, right? And you go, you don't like what you're getting, look at who you're being, right? And you will get the products of your harvest, right? You keep planting seeds, you're going to get those.
Yeah. And, I think that there's also for people who cringe a little bit at some of the more woo-woo type of vocabulary that you were warning about is I think that there's also a pretty, you can look at it in a rational view as well. It's like, well, okay, so if there's something that you want in your life or want to do in your life, and you set yourself into motion to doing that thing, it's going to set a sort of like a chain of responses in the world, right? It's going to force you into situations, interactions, challenges, all kinds of things that you don't know are there, right? Like there's there's going to be ones that you probably will know. That's like, okay, I'm probably going to face some of these things, but there's always stuff that you can't, that you're never going to be able to know or account for. Right. And some of those things, yeah, like you might end up bemoaning them and, just like, oh, why is this got to be that way? And da, 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 da. Well, all of those challenges are teaching you how to do that thing, right? This step that's there. It's like, well, yeah, you're running into this because you've never done this before or faced this before. So now you have to face this thing and work through it, right? So it's not necessarily some kind of woo-woo thing. I think that it's like, yeah, like it's like if you actually set something into motion, I think that, and you alluded to that, where it's, just saying, oh, I want this, and then doing nothing, like there's like we're hearing like a story about, just sort of like a little parable about this person who was praying every day, like, please God, let me win the lottery. Right. And for over a year, like, let me win the lottery. And eventually this person heard, after not, having not won the lottery, and then God responds just like, well, why don't you buy a ticket? Like, it's there's something that you got to put into motion at the very least, like you got to, there's some sort of action movement that you have to actually take. It's not just about if you want it hard enough, which, apologies to anyone who's a fan of The Secret, but it's like that's not really how the world works.
Well, let me say something about that, because The Secret was, basically turned into something where they could make a lot of money, really, and it was, what sells that, or what sold that at the time, and this was, if this is before your time and you're a little younger, like basically this book and this DVD or this documentary came out, and it was like called The Secret, and it was all about how you can manifest and have everything you want, which is, there's a truth to it. The problem is that the way it was marketed and presented was really just like, because people buy easy. People are like, oh, I could just think about it and feel it and I can have what I want. It's like, well, yeah, kind of, but not exactly. But you're kind of missing some things. Like, for example, It does say this in The Secret, because I was like, let me review this. I have to look at this thing, because like, what's going on here? And it does say, hey, when the opportunity presents itself, act on it. But it's been such a small amount of time talking about that. It's like, wait a minute. You are like, you will, if you do think about something and you put energy towards it and you continually feel it in your life as though it's already happened, what will happen is not that you will get it necessarily, but it will present opportunities for you to get it. And when those opportunities come, you have to act on them and be in the practice of acting on them. And by the way, the path to what you want is not always obvious. So sometimes you're like, oh, like, why would I talk to this old lady at the grocery store who seems to be, talking nonsense? Little did you know that she was the grandmother of the business executive who was going to give you the career opportunity that was going to open up your life, and like, or maybe that, for example, I got into the film industry. One of the people I met, one of the casting directors, I sold her shoes. And we were just talking about runners, and she's like, oh, I'm in the film industry and blah, blah, blah. And we were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, I'm getting into acting. She's like, great, anytime, I'm going to bring you into the room. Because I sold her a pair of shoes with gusto. Yeah. Who the fuck knows what you're doing and how things are connected? The thing is that you have to be open, and you have to be willing to talk about what you want. And you have to be willing to engage with it and take action and do stuff. And so, and yeah, it isn't really that woo-woo. The thing is that I look at it like it's woo-woo because we don't have a way to rationally describe it, essentially. And we don't understand it entirely. And I think this is where like art fills in a lot of gaps for us. It fills in that magic area where we're like, I don't really know how this works, but I'm going to kind of trust. And we talked a lot about this in the podcast, right? And so I feel like, like I'm not going to say that The Secret is just bad. It's just that it's incomplete in its presentation, and it puts too much weight on, in my opinion, it just puts too much weight on one thing without putting weight on the other thing, which is sometimes the pain that you have to go through and the discomfort of action. Here's a quote I heard. One last thing, Evan. You will always have a philosophy to back up your whatever you want to call it, and in this case, it would be lack of courage. You'll always have a philosophy to back up what you don't like, what you want to avoid. Everybody has a philosophy to back it up. So if you want something, look at your philosophy, because your philosophy is usually what's keeping you from having it. You need to change the way you look at the world. You need to change the way you see things and the way you act in accordance to the world, because your philosophy will justify your cowardice. So, for example, for the young men out there who maybe there's a woman or somebody you like out there, I don't know. It was like, that's what it was for me. If I have a philosophy that is, she's not going to want to talk to me. She's with her friends. My hair isn't done today. I'm not dressed right. Those are all philosophies that justify you being alone and not being the person you want. The philosophy that is going to get you success is, I'm always going out the door ready to meet the person I'm looking for. And the moment I see her, him, whoever, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to them. And I'm going to say, hey, how you doing? And I will go from there.
Yeah.
And that is much better than, oh, my hair isn't done. Oh, I just wore the wrong thing. Or, oh, I'm a little tired today. Or, oh, she's with her friends. Whatever. You see it, the opportunity presents itself, you take action and you just go. And you have to get that mindset of, it doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter if it's scary. It doesn't matter about any of the bullshit that has kept me away from this thing that I want. And if you start doing this stuff, you will get results. But what do you have to face in the meantime? Rejection. You have to face, getting ignored. Brutal. That's even worse than rejection. You have to face all sorts of stuff. Getting laughed at, maybe, and then and then you might have to look at yourself and be like, you know what? I'm really out of shape, and I'm broke, and I'm blah blah blah. And you look at yourself and okay, I got to fix some things because I'm not really a good partner for the kind of person I want. See how it's changing who you are, right? Anyway, I went on a lot of things, but these are ideas that I feel like if we handle them, they become to fill in the big picture stuff that we're not understanding.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely it's been interesting, sort of
angle,
that whole dialogue and where it's come to. I think towards the end here, it's given me some interesting thoughts on it. I mean, I just on like a smaller note, I'll say it's I do also think that there's a side of this that where you hear those stories of people who look back on their life or their career or something and they say, thank God I didn't get the thing that I wanted. Like there's a part of his, so there's always this thing to me about like this hyper focus on what is it that you want and that you desire, because I think that is maybe the most confused part of ourselves that we live with on a day-to-day basis. I think that sometimes, just when I'm being really honest with myself, I have days where I'm honestly like, I actually don't even, where I actually feel like I think I'm so fucking confused about what I actually want, that I don't like, where I'm just like, I have absolutely no idea. Where I actually think that I'm like, I like sometimes I think that I know what I want, but then I have days where I'm like, is that really what it is? And so that's that's that can be a very big and tough and challenging question. Sometimes the thing that you want is not really actually the thing that you truly want, but as we've talked about many times before, but you think you do, and sometimes
and this is good. You're getting into this,
and sometimes the pursuit of it is
find
important.
out you don't want it.
Exactly, right? And it guides you. And there's that whole, another one of those famous little quotes wherever it came from. It's like if you want to tell God a joke, tell him your plans, right? So there's that whole side of it as well. And then there's this other thing that you were, with some of the things you were saying, that I was like, in terms of the big picture, this thing that you're saying about what's the philosophy underneath it that supports, that sort of story that you're telling about these things. And it's very much a big picture type of thing, and about taking that big picture view on your life. Because how many of us are just, we do have that small picture thing of just trying to, and don't get me wrong, there can be a lot of very good reasons for it, and challenges, and just trying to get by day to day sometimes really can be a struggle, and it can be difficult to keep that big picture in mind, because you're just, I just got to deal with this little thing here, and this little thing here, and this little thing here, and you lose perspective on what the whole thing's about. And you're the sort of scenario of just trying to approach a person that you're attracted to, right? And the whole thing is like, well, what's the big picture? It's like, well, you really want to find a life partner. You want to spend your life with somebody, and how are you going to meet that person? And so that's suddenly going into a bigger picture, like a slightly bigger picture than what you might have been in before, right? What is this actually about? Why do I want to go and talk to that person? Oh, it's actually because I want this thing in my life. But if you get too narrow focus, like, oh, my hair isn't right. It's like, I haven't been to the gym in 2 weeks. I don't feel, it's just like, like it's like your focus has just become so narrow, so small. Yeah. And so often you don't even know the thing that a person's going to be attracted to in you anyhow.
Yeah, I got something to throw into this.
Sure, go for it.
So even thinking about your life partner is too small.
Oh yeah, no, it's still too small. Thing.
That seems like a big thing. Oh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to find the love of my life, and like, and I first heard you say that, I'm like, wait a minute, you're thinking too big. You got to just focus on the moment, be present. I'm like, no, wait a minute, that's too small. Because the thing is that big picture is that you're gonna meet somebody that will open your mind to that making sense. Right now, it's just theory, because you saw someone else do it, or it's something happens in culture, or it's normal. And so then, people get caught into this. I get caught into this idea, right? It's like, well, I want to have these things that everyone else has, and I'm supposed to do this, and at this point in my life, this is supposed to be worked out or figured out. And it's like, don't look at it that way. And the other thing too is, like, minute focus is part of the problem as well. It's like we get so caught up into like, is this like thinking about ourselves? First of all, that's so minute. That's like the worst. So if you're thinking about yourself, like, even like, we know this is an acting, like, you just destroy your performance.
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah. It's over, right? So stop thinking about yourself. But it's like that in life. And the next best thing to do is start thinking about them and just connecting with them, and then going, okay, well, what's going on for them? But like, look at it in even a bigger picture than that, and just go like what's going on in the whole thing here, like the whole play. Because like, you and this person are just a couple people in billions right now. So, your story, although it's important to you in the scheme of humanity and everything, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? So you got to look at it and just be like, well, I'm just talking to somebody. And if they don't want to talk to me, then I won't talk to them. And if maybe they do want to talk to me, but their guard's up, I'll try to get through their guard. And, and if they don't want to put their guard down, then you know what, we'll look at a different approach next time and whatever. And, for example, I took my motorcycle out the other day. This is an interesting moment. I don't know if it relates, but I took my motorcycle out. I'm touring around, I'm exploring the area, and I go into this area, and it did say private property, but it kind of like... Here's the thing. I definitely went into private property, but I didn't realize I had, because I kind of thought there was a fork, and so I thought maybe that was private property, and I was actually okay. So I'm like, oh, it looks okay. And I'm driving my motorcycle, and I'm going down, and it leads down to this marina or whatever, and I'm like, oh, this is really beautiful, and like, whatever. And as I'm coming back up, this older guy comes out, and he like steps in front of my bike. And he's like, hey, what are you doing over here? And I was like, I'm just exploring the area. He's like, don't you know this is private property? I was like, oh, I didn't realize. I'm sorry. He's like, well, how would you like it if someone came into your area? And I'm like, you're right. I just moved here. I'm exploring the area. And he's like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, man. I'm like, sorry, man. I didn't mean to interrupt. And he's like, oh, that's cool. He's like, nice bike. I'm like, thanks. So we start chatting. And I'm like, okay, man. Well, look, I'm sorry to disturb you. And I took off. This whole interaction started off with conflict. Hey, you're in our zone. Like, get out of here. What are you doing? You're being inconsiderate. To nice bike. Hey, nice to meet you. You know, whatever. The thing is that in the big picture of things, the first priority for him was, hey, you're basically in my backyard, and like I'm protecting it, and I don't want you here, and I don't want anyone taking advantage of this or whatever. To, hey, we're connecting. And so if you get too caught in the minute of, oh, I've done something wrong, I made a mistake, it's the end of the world, blah, 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 and you get all caught in that, it lives there. But, I'm looking at it going, okay, look, I'm here, I'm leaving, because I was on my way back out, and I'm like, now we're clear. Cool, nice to meet you. I'm from here too. Now let's, whatever. Okay, great. Hey, nice bike. Okay, have a good evening. Sorry to disturb you. And we're off, and we're peaceful, right? And there's a shift. The thing is that, at the end of the day, like I was looking at it as I was driving away. I was thinking, Brandon, what's your philosophy? My philosophy is harmony, peace. So at the end of the day, what did I get? I got harmony and peace, because at the end of the day, my philosophy justified my harmony and peace. And no matter how he came at me, even if he wanted to fight me, it was still going to lead to harmony and peace, because that's where I was headed. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so like the thing is you will get what you're after. And the thing is, if you're not getting what you're after, then it might, like you said earlier, that might not be what you're after. But you don't know that yet. Because there is this part of me that's like, it's probably in there where it's just like, yeah, fuck you, man, telling me what to do. Like, I'm going to fucking jet off in my bike, so go fuck yourself. Like, there's definitely that option. But, you get where you put your energy. You get where you put your attention, right? And so, big picture, I just look at it like this. Like, you're just a branch on a tree growing towards the sun, connected to something else. Like, you're just a small, tiny part of the forest, right? But your part matters, but your branch will grow to wherever, you formulate directing yourself. And if you're trying to grow towards the ground and the world's like, no, the sun's up here, you're going to find out pretty quickly that you're going the wrong way, and you're going to get negative results, right? Which is going to cause more and more pain. Ultimately, you're going to start to go, wait a minute, I need to change direction. So if you keep going after something and you just keep getting pain, and it's just like it's not working, and you're trying to force it, and all this bad stuff keeps happening, try to look and go like, well, where am I trying to go? What am I trying to like what do I think I'm going to get? Because sometimes we get so like narrow and blind to what we're doing that we think we have to do things. I don't want to get too far off course, but you know what I'm saying? I feel like big picture is, here's my thing. Big picture is recognize you're connected, at the same time, like finding your own light,
Well, yeah, finding how you actually fit within the whole thing,
Yeah.
right?
And know that you're not
knowing first of all that you fit with the whole
Yes.
thing, right? And then figuring out, okay, so what is that thing that I am to fit within this? And that's, part of, that's knowing yourself, right? Which is a big thing, because sometimes, like it's learning just to figure out the mystery that you are to yourself is never one of those things that there's no answer to that, right? Necessarily, which is something I always get a kick out of when I think of how I feel like I learned acting to a large degree. It was just like, you're going to learn who this person is and there's an answer for them. and actors do very often treat it that way. It's like, I just have to investigate and I'll find the answer to this human being and then I can play them. And it's like, well, I mean, you're going to learn a lot about them, hopefully, and you will continue to do so. And hopefully by the time you stop performing, you've never stopped. Like, you've just continued to try and understand and discover. It's that way in performance. It's that way in life as well. And it's interesting. One of the things that's coming up for me in this sort of the direction of this thing is actually something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. And it's this question, and it might throw some people off to talk about this, but I think psychologically, from what is happening, to again try and make this as reasonable of a proposition to everyone as possible. This is something that a lot of very learned intellectual people are talking about more and more and more. But it's this question of, what do you worship? Right? And this has become, I think, this question has, I think, been coming back up in our culture and our society in a powerful new way, simply because there's this understanding that we all worship something, right? And if you hate that word, but there's a truth to that thing, right? And so we're talking about, before it used to be for a lot of people religion, but now we're a more secular world. And it's like, so what's replaced that? And a lot of people are very concerned about what has replaced that thing is maybe not that much better than the thing that people were trying to get away from, right? And I don't want to comment too much on that whole debate because it's not really important. But this question of, well, what is it that you worship in your life? What's your main thing? I mean, that's a big picture question, right? What is that thing that underlies and guides your choices, your direction, what you're doing with your life, right? And you're talking about this interaction where you're like, no, this is going to be, like peace and, like a peaceful and non-conflictual conflictual is that, I don't even know if that's a
harmonious.
word. Harmonious. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I couldn't think of the word. Harmonious interaction. Right. And it's funny because I've always just somewhat always held a belief as well throughout my life of I can move through conflicts without a fight kind of a thing. And even in situations where I've had people around me think there's like, oh shit, this is about to turn into like an actual physical altercation. And I've just been able to diffuse those types of situations. And it's like, but then there's people who they seem to end up in physical altercations with people all the time. Right. And there's this, and to me, you could potentially look at it in that sense, like, okay, well, what do these people worship, right? What is on their altar of their life? Yeah. Right. And that's something that I've incorporated into my list of sort of questions for actors too. It's like any part you play, you should be seriously navigating that question, because it tells a lot about a person. What does this person worship? You know, is it money? Is it fame? Is it you know, like whatever it could be. It could be a more spiritual nature. It could be a more material nature type of thing. But what is it? Because it's informing really everything that they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just because you might hold something of value, like you worship or whatever, it doesn't mean that you do it in a good way. Like, there's
absolutely.
I mean, people, like, for example, like sometimes people can worship money, but they're broke all the time. Like they're just, and it's like, well, so you just because you worship it doesn't mean that you're going to get blessed with it or something. There's people who worship money and all they talk about is how broke they are and how much life's a struggle and all they ever think about is how hard everything is and how unfair everything is. And I get it. It's a seductive thing because there is a certain kind of reality to, the economy of things and all of that and resources and whatnot. But, one of the things, like if you want to go back to like manifestation, if you behave and act in a way in which you're broke and in poverty, by all likelihood, you will stay broke and in poverty because you behave in accordance to a way that will make that so. And even if, and you see this because even if you do make a lot of money, you'll find a way to spend it and get rid of it and just essentially find yourself broke and struggle all over again because the problem is that it becomes comfortable. And, I heard something the other day. I thought this was actually interesting. I don't think this is too far off topic because it kind of relates. But your comfort zone is necessary in the sense that you go there to recuperate, to repair, to be in some type of peace and serenity, to essentially adjust and work it out. If you're in a comfort zone and you're just disconnecting and you're like, I don't want to be here and you're trying to run away from life, you're going to get stuck in that comfort zone because that comfort zone is you escaping reality. Comfort zone should be a time of facing reality in peace and going, okay, you know what? I'm on the weekend. I'm in my comfort zone. I'm having a beer. I'm watching the tube, whatever you're doing. And you're like, I hate my fucking job. That's a call to action. That's not a let's have another beer and drown that feeling out. Let's fucking get rid of that feeling and I'll go back on Monday. And that's a call to action. What would it take for me to quit this fucking job I hate or to start liking it? That's what your comfort zone is for. It's not for you to run further away from reality. And I think the thing is that we do these things. Like people show up to their job and they hate their job and they hate it every day for 40 years or 50 years or something. They hate it the whole time. And like, imagine it was your best friend and they kept saying, hey, I hate my job. I hate my job. I hate my job every weekend. I hate my job. I hate my job. Maybe you have a friend like this and they say this. Yeah. You should be saying to your friend, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to quit and get a new job? Are you going to start liking it? What would it take for you to like it? What would you have to do to like it? Like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? How do we change what you don't like and start making more of what we do like? You know, the thing is that here's the thing. We live our life like we're disconnected from reality. And this is big picture. Big picture is, hey man, if I don't do anything about this job I hate, this is an example, you will continue to worship hating your job and going down the road of hating your life and trying to run away from your life and do all this. And then, you're going to be faced with something. So this is where people don't want to go. This is the pain that comes back. What else am I going to do? It's the only thing I've ever done. I have a family to support. Okay, great. All that's true. That's what you're going to deal with on your weekend in your comfort zone when you get home from this shit. And you're going to deal with that, and you're going to answer those questions. Well, what could I do to support my family in an alternative way? Is there a way where I could bridge out of this? Is there a way I could put some money aside to give myself a few months to take a leap, to try something else, to whatever?
Yeah.
Or just fucking live in this shit, because that's the shit you chose to live in. You get what you are, not what you want. And you are, when you run away from your life, you continue to be the life you're running away from. You don't change it. And look, I've lived a lot of different lives. I've made a lot of different transitions in my life, and sometimes it's been real hell, and sometimes it's been real blessing. And and sometimes you want the blessings to last forever, and you want the hell to just end. And sometimes it feels like the reverse. But the thing is that you have to at some point ask yourself the real question: am I okay with this? And if I'm not, what am I going to do about it? And this is our part in the whole, because, here's the thing. Like, if you're a little treeling underneath the forest and all the big trees are taking all the light up in the sky, you can look up at all those trees from this little treeling you are and go, it's so unfair. They're blocking all the light. They got there first, and now I'm so late to the party. When am I ever going to do it? Or you can say, hey, you know what? I'm inspired by all these. I'm going to grow upward towards that. I'm going to break through that barrier there, and I'm going to get the light above them, and you might go, well, that's impossible. They're way ahead of me. I'll never have time. And the thing is that you need to look at yourself in terms of something that, like, things can change. You know what I mean? And you might find that you might say, well, I'm not working against these trees. Here's another philosophy thing. I know I'm going off on a bunch of shit here, but you start out that little treeling looking up at these trees blocking the light from you. And instead of looking at these other trees blocking the light from you and saying, oh, it's unfair, blah, 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 that's your philosophy, that's your story. Why don't you go and say to those trees, hey, I want to be up there with you guys. Can you part a little bit? Give me a little bit of light. Give me a little bit of a chance. And you might find that these things that you initially looked as obstacles are actually your best friends and your advocates and your helpers. But we have this mentality where we look at the world like enemy. That's why I say, like, this whole situation, and I'll go back to that, with harmony and peace with this guy. I could look at him like enemy, or I could look at him like advocate, like friend, like, whatever. Maybe it's only a temporary interaction. But you know what? It was a positive interaction. What does that mean in the scheme of things? Well, I turned a guy that was initially against me to be, hey, like, good day, nice bike, have a good one, see you later. See you later. Like, yeah. I'm not even supposed to be here. We won't see each other later, not here, because I'm not coming back, because I'm not going to infringe on your zone, but unless I'm invited. But the thing is, you see what I'm saying? Like philosophy, man. It's
no, absolutely.
It connects the whole, and it's how we see the whole in us relation to the whole. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
it's like what is your life about, right? And
can I say one thing while you're on this thought? Universal truth. You mentioned this in the beginning. I feel like this is what this is all coming back to. What's the universal truth? That's the big picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, and it's these questions I feel that we've become so disconnected from. I think that, we've become so individualized in our lives, and we've become so disconnected from our culture and from the world around us. I saw this ad last night, actually, for some airline, whatever, and there's Penelope Cruz and some new area where it's like you literally have your own little, like, it doesn't look large, Penelope Cruz is tiny. Yeah, your own little room. You just shut everyone out and be in your own little space. And I just thought, wow, like, and they're selling it as being like, oh, isn't this just so great? Isn't it? And like, hey, don't get me wrong, I like my alone time, when I can get it as much as the next person. But I'm just like, is this the height of civilization? You just get to shut, the more I can shut myself off from everyone and everything, the better, and just like, no wonder we have such a mental health fucking crisis. It's because like we're so disconnected from each other, and we don't thrive that way. We're social animals, and we need to feel a sense of that connection and purpose in the world. Like we're contributing to something, like we're giving to something bigger than ourselves. And so philosophy, you're saying philosophy, these questions about, what is life? What is it to be a human being? What is a good life? What is that actually? These are philosophical questions, and ones that we still wrestle with, and why art is still so relevant. And to paraphrase one of my favorite quotes, which we've talked about on the show, by Frederick Buechner, he says, art is one of the few places left where we can speak to each other of holy things, right? When we're so divorced from religion and spirituality to a large degree, it's just like we still need to have places where we can talk about some way to talk about this stuff, right? To engage with these philosophical questions. And I think that we've stopped engaging with a lot of these things, and we've tried to fill that gap with, cars and streaming services and TVs and shit. You know what I mean? Like it's...
Hey, and there's nothing wrong with a nice TV and a nice car.
No, there isn't. Hey everybody, this is Evan, and this episode is brought to you by my book. Yes, I recently released a book called The Actor's Awakening: Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Expand yourself as an actor and your craft through a spiritual perspective. Take a journey that will explore universal philosophies and insights to help you understand human nature in a profound way, and develop practices to take your work to another level. Again, that's The Actor's Awakening: Connecting Spirituality to Craft. Available on Kindle and paperback on Amazon. And as always, if you like the show, please subscribe.
Yeah.
There isn't, but to bring in one of, again, our favorites, we probably reference him on every show, but Alan Watts, I remember one of his lectures, he says, it's like, these things are all fine. There's nothing bad about them. Just don't think you're going to get anything from them.
Mm-hmm. Except maybe a good time.
Yeah, but it's like, eventually it's like,
Yeah.
like
but it's temporary.
It's so temporary,
That's so right. It's good to have It's like good to have some ice cream every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like life isn't just ice cream, but it's nice to have ice cream, Like, I got this motorcycle, Evan. It's fucking blast. Honestly, I'm like, this is the most fun I've ever had. Like, I'm like a kid. This is so great. But here's the thing. It's a nice thing on the journey, but it's not the point. And I think the thing is that I do think, so, okay, Hinduism, right? Just throw in something.
Motorcycles. Okay. Hinduism. Here we go.
Stay with me here. So Hinduism, from what I understand, is the kind of belief that everything out here is all called Maya, which is all an illusion. Everything's all an illusion. And then there's the self. And the self, is basically interacting with this illusion, right? And so you look at it, you go, okay, well, my motorcycle, it's like, according to Hinduism, it's an illusion, right? And it's I think the thing is like when you're, and go to Buddhism, for example. So there's other philosophies, right? Where I think it's called a bodhisattva, which is somebody who's aware of the illusion, but then kind of like still plays in it anyway, but knowing it's an illusion. The thing is that these things we get caught up in. So like initially these things that feel good, you can still play in them, but also know that they're not really the point. It's like an illusion. And it's like you can still enjoy it and like have fun with it and play with it and be like, okay, like I'm playing in the illusion. And then eventually what you'll find is that the illusion just kind of runs out, it wears out, and then you need something new and you got something else, you've moved on, and now something else has got your interest. But if you see yourself as not the illusion, but separate from the illusion, you go, yeah, well, this was a fun ride. Like it was like at Disneyland. Like this was fun and we went on the roller coaster and now it's over. Mm-hmm. And like, let's go to the next thing. But if you keep going like, oh, God, go back to that moment when things were so great. And maybe if I just get this next sports car, this next thing, then it'll be good. Then it'll be good again. And it's like, you're just chasing the illusion and it's like a drug now. And I think, that's what makes this life so complicated is like, we we get so caught in the external world and materialism and these wants that we think we need and all of this type of stuff. And there's a certain amount of getting what you want, which I think is important because it makes you active and it gives you something to do. But I think there's also this point of like just coming to that point where you go, you know what, I wanted this and I don't anymore. And that's also just as good as getting what you want. Recognizing you don't want something is like freeing. Just like, you know, when you finally get something, it's kind of freeing because you got it. It's also freeing when you actually genuinely realize, you know, like there was a long time I really wanted this and now I don't. And that's actually feels really good to not want that anymore because I spent a lot of time thinking I wanted that. And then it doesn't mean you lost. It's actually a good thing. It's a win.
Well, yeah, sometimes because it creates enough pain and suffering in your life that you just go like, why am I doing this?
Well, that's another thing about wants, and Alan Watts talks about this too, right? Is that the wants create the pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: we love the pain and suffering. The thing is people, like especially goal-oriented people, you start to like the pain. It's like it feels good to be in that struggle of trying to get something. Like it feels so fucking good to like, I'm working at it. I'm getting closer. I can feel myself getting closer. I accomplished this thing. You know, and then, but it's painful because you don't have it, and then you get it, and there's this release, and then it's like, then you don't want anything for a second, and you're like, oh man, I need my next thing, I need my next hit of something to want.
Yeah, I mean, and because I mean, I think that there's different kinds of pain here, because there's a certain kind of pain that's. I think the thing that I'm sort of thinking more about is the kind of pain that is that emptiness at the end of it all, you know, and I'll just say one thing: the bodhisattva is, as I understand, the bodhisattva is an enlightened being who could pass on to the next realm, but sticks around, comes back to help save people. But there's, but the Buddhists also have this, I think it's in Buddhism, there's different types of people. There's sort of like almost like Buddhist archetypes of people who exist. And one of them is the realm of the hungry ghosts. And so and everyone sort of embodies one of these things. And the hungry ghosts are like the people who, as it sort of implies, like they're always hungry. They're never satisfied. They get the thing, and then I need another thing and another thing and another thing. And there's an emptiness to that thing. And I think it comes back to that, well, what's the big picture, right? What is the big picture for you? Because it doesn't seem like that's in place. Despite so many incredible potential successes that you have, there's this constant painful emptiness about your life, right? And the big sort of philosophical questions that we're talking about and that bigger picture thing is very often what people end up searching for. They end up seeking something. It's just like, I've got everything. How come I'm still so unhappy? Right? Like, what the hell is going on? And it's, and there are many paths in which that can lead a person on, but it takes you to a place where it's just like, well, it's a little bit immaterial, right? There's something that's a little bit inexplicable about what that thing is. And I think that's why that can be such an interesting and powerful place for people to arrive to. You know, Jim Carrey has that, I think, somewhat famous speech where he says, I hope you get everything that you ever wanted to realize it's not what you wanted. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you have a huge house full of things and there's just, you're still there and this feeling is still there. And where do you find that happiness and where do you find that joy? And there was one other thing that that I'm coming back to, you had said that I wanted to comment on. You're talking about, you're looking up this metaphor of the trees, and I'm looking at these big trees that they've risen to where I want to go, but man, they've had years of growth ahead of me, and it's like I think that it's an interesting image, but there's a part of me that can't help but feel that the metaphor is not entirely accurate for how because I think it leaves out a certain dimension of human life and experience and how things play out sometimes, because there are people who you bring, even though you might not have been in something for a while, or you've maybe never been in something that you feel compelled to go to, if you're going that direction, you're just like, oh my God, there's all these people who've been doing this for such a long time. Who am I? Right? But there can be such tremendous power to a person who has gone and lived this other. All right, we're back after technical corrections here. So to pick up on what I was saying is that in terms of your metaphor with the trees and these things this started me. Thing is that I guess if I were to try and make the metaphor work again, it's like almost like your perspective is incorrect, because the thing is that all of the experiences that you've had up to that point before you've decided you wanted to try and do this thing, well, you've been growing too. And there's all of these things that you have that you can actually bring to that thing. Sometimes an outsider's perspective on a new thing, it can be so valuable. You can be bringing something that someone else hasn't thought of, right? So that was really my only point there, is that like sometimes your thought that, oh, these people, these trees have had all of this time ahead of me. And it's like, well, yes, that's true, but you're failing to recognize all of these things that you might have to give to this thing, right? Your own experience, your own voice, your own understanding and perspective on this thing is maybe something that no one's ever heard of. Right. And maybe that thing is one of the most important things to happen to this, right? So that was all I was trying to say to that.
Yeah, so much of it's perspective. So let me ask you a question. If I gave you something, you can never give it away to anyone else. If I was to give you $1 billion, can't give it away, but I'll give you $1 billion. The cost of it for you is that you will not wake up tomorrow. Would you take the $1 billion?
No, definitely not.
Of course you wouldn't. Which means that your tomorrow is worth more than $1 billion. But we don't think of life that way. We take tomorrow for granted, and we think, oh man, if only I had this money to pay my rent, to do this thing, to buy this thing I want. And it's like, yeah, and you have tomorrow, and you have this theoretically many tomorrows, and you just don't even care. And you just take them all for granted. And, I took a walk through the forest. I love taking walks through the forest. And as I was walking through this one area, I have pictures. There's these trees, and they've fallen over. And they have these massive, like all their roots got ripped out. And so they have this big plate of roots underneath them. And they were all of them had fallen east, every single tree. And I'm just looking through this area. I'm like, man, there's so many trees that have fallen over, and every single one had fallen east. And if you looked onto the horizon, you could see that they had kind of clear cut to put in, like there'd been developments over in that area. And I was like, how interesting. All of these trees used to be protected by other trees. And they cut down those trees, and the roots in these trees were not deep enough when the windstorm came, which obviously was a windstorm that just blew all these things over. And so thinking about this little treeling in the middle of all these other big trees, and you think, oh man, if only I was there first. Well, don't forget, these big trees are protecting you from elements, from wind, from all sorts of stuff. And so there's perspective. We just lose perspective all the time, and we don't see the big picture.
Well, it's interesting that what you just brought up, it's like that made me think of big picture, but in a different way.
Okay.
You know, just like this sort of interference in a thing. You have no idea the ripple effects of these things. And this is not just mine, but a lot of people, why a lot of people have big questions around things like technology, you know, what we're doing with technology and things like that. And along with that, our hubris with what we can do with technology, which is extraordinary. But at the same time, we go, it's like, yes, but these interferences, you have no idea what this might do, right? Like because we don't have that big picture. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of time and resources that goes into trying to fully understand understand as best as possible the potential impact of something. But we're still so limited in how much of that we can understand, even with the most intelligent minds in their fields applied to something. There's always unexpected things that come up. And then you want to throw in the whole thing of financial incentive and how that pushes things along into sort of release into the world, you know, before we've really thought about the potential consequences of it. Then, you know, we have a situation where it's, like we're dealing with the biggest threats to us in humanity are all technological ones, right? Or have been caused by technological things that have been done. Mm-hmm. If you really think about it, like what are the biggest threats to us as a global humanity? It's all has to do with technology, right? I'm kind of going off on another thing, but it's big picture stuff, right? It's all like it all comes down to big picture stuff. And you know, that's a big picture, but then in trying to understand, okay, so then why has that happened? And that's another, well, we have to go deeper and we have to go and look at this in a bigger perspective. But so much of all of those problems, I think, have to do with having too narrow of a perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, there's all sorts of things where it's like we try to fix something, we cause another problem. And we try to do something or get something, and we cause, you know, another issue that, you know, is just, I don't know, it just creates some other problem, and then you got to solve that problem and whatever, and it's endless, right? And I think the thing is like when we're looking at this whole concept of big picture, I think one of the things to consider is that you don't necessarily know the effects of what it is you think you're doing and what you think you're after. And so before you're too certain about how this has to be and you're supposed to get what you want and you're supposed to do what you're trying to do, if it's not working, if there's something about it that is you're getting feedback that like there's something off about it, then I think it's important to consider that maybe that's saving you from catastrophe. And that can be on the micro level and your personal level, and it can be on the macro level in a cultural, societal type of thing as well, you know, whatever, worldly thing. But the thing is like, you know, like there's all sorts of weird shit we're trying to do. Like, you know, we're like, oh, we use too much energy, we use too much power, we need to fix this. And then these solutions that they're coming up with, they're not good solutions. And that's the bottom line. And people are like, oh, the electric car, that'll solve everything. Wind power, that'll solve everything. No, it fucking won't. It's not the right solution. I can tell you it's not the right solution because look into this shit and you're going to find out it's not. Because they don't have enough fucking power to fucking charge these fucking cars. What's going to end up happening, here's the real solution. You're not going to have a car unless you're of a certain class, of a certain person, and you're going to be able to afford that freedom. And everyone else, you're going to be stuck on automated traffic. You're going to be on a glorified version of the bus That's what's going to happen. So this whole illusion that you're going to have your own electric car and all that's going to happen in the future and that's going to get net zero, it's not going to fucking work that way. It just doesn't, the math doesn't add up. But the thing is they need people to buy into the dream of this thing. And the problem is like you go, okay, people believe it. You think you're going to get what you want. You think you're going to get this thing. You're not. So you got to ask yourself, you got to look into the future. You got to see into the bigger picture of like, where does this really lead? Don't just listen to the narrative. Because like, some rapper is telling you, oh, hey, I got, this is how I live. This is what I do. And people believe that shit and they think that's how you're supposed to live. Whatever it is. Look into the future of where this stuff leads, and you're going to find out that, spending all your money while you're young, buying fancy cars and jewelry is a dumb thing to do that leads to, really negative outcomes. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that the electric car is bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there are problems in the way that we're trying to do a lot of the stuff we're trying to do. And we don't realize the cost that's about to come if we actually were to take these steps as quickly as we think we're supposed to take them. And you just gotta ask more questions and look a little bit further than just trusting the narrative. Because right now we essentially have corporations, and we have kind of like, I would say, at least a certain amount of corrupt politicians in power. And they're looking at how they can exploit opportunity in this moment. And they take our better nature and they get us to go down this road with them but it's not doing anything for us. It's actually just lining their pockets. If we really wanted a solution, we need to look at how we're going to live in 100 years, not in 10 years. We need to look, but the problem is we won't do that because we're just thinking about ourselves and our own life. And our own, and we're thinking about the next 30 or 40 or 50 years of our life. We're not thinking of 100 years and, our children's grandchildren. You know what I mean? And that's the problem. Like, that's where a lot of this stuff falls apart.
Which it makes us exactly the same as the generations that rich class that you're talking about, right? It's focused on yourself and about the next 40, 50 years. It makes us exactly the same. And I mean, I feel like we're heading into like a territory that's like we might be getting into the weeds, as fascinating as a conversation as it can be to get into. But I'll just say that all of that stuff, as big as it sounds, because they are big conversations, I still would say it's still a bigger problem, and I will point to people who've thought this through a lot more than I have, but who've definitely been shaping a lot of my thinking recently. But Paul Kingsnorth, you listen to him talk about how a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do is really just about making this really terrible system sustainable. Like, it's just like, oh, we need to make the terrible system sustainable so that it can keep working, because it literally cannot keep working the way that it's going.
Right.
So it's like, how do we make it a sustainable and green thing that's still terrible, that still requires people to, travel, an hour each way to a job that they hate so that they can earn a little bit of money to pay for a bunch of shit that they can't really afford, that they don't really need, that they don't really want, but still have that empty feeling inside. So the problem...
That's great. That's a great point.
The problem is still bigger. The problem is still deeper. The problem is why do we think that is acceptable? Why do we think that is the good way of living? And we've convinced ourselves that that's the case, right? And this is, I know this is maybe more of a personal diatribe than I usually go into on this podcast, but these are the things that I think, coming back to like art and philosophy, that these are the things that it's often trying to wake us up to. It's just like, ask these questions, because like, just look at what your life is, and life, and what life is around you and for others, and get really honest about how certain things are. And it's like, and is this actually what life is, right? Is this actually the peak and the pinnacle of human experience, right? And getting very serious about these questions, or at least very sincere about these questions, because they don't necessarily have concrete, definite answers, but outcomes, but it's the only way in which I think that we can realistically begin to address problems. And that's always the case, where it begins with us, right? If we have a problem with big sort of corporate and just like insane billionaires, like, which some people argue shouldn't, there shouldn't be people who have a certain amount of wealth. I'm not going to comment on that, because I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But it's like, recognize how, as we've been saying, you're a part of it. Like, we're all contributing to that thing, and that might just be because we've bought into something. And I have sympathy for that, because there is an asymmetry that exists between, just being a regular everyday person and having teams of marketers that have learned things and how to influence you and make you want things and to try and just pad their own profits. Like, it's not necessarily a fair fight, but it doesn't make us entirely powerless in the whole thing in that perspective. But it's coming back to that question of like, well, what is the thing that you worship, right? Like, what is it that you worship in life? And if you don't like the thing that you are worshiping, because there also might be something that you say is the thing that you worship in life, but then if you actually look at how you conduct your life and how you are doing things in your life, you realize that the thing that you're actually worshiping in your life is something much different, right? And that all requires that philosophic, introspective, giving a shit about those things. And that can be a hard thing to do. It can be a really devastating thing to do even, but it might also be the only way for you to actually have something that resembles a joyful life.
Well, I just want to say one thing. I know we're probably getting close to wrapping this baby up, but it's like, having our advancements serve a system that doesn't even work. Like, we're working out of the Industrial Revolution to some degree, right? With the technocracy that's forming, and and we're trying to get this technocracy to serve our Industrial Revolution development, and and so it's like, it's almost laughable, because someone in the future would look back and go, ha, he was talking about people actually having to travel to work and do things. Like the thing is, in the future, we don't even know, like, if we'll be even going to workplaces anymore. I mean, maybe some people will. Maybe that'll be a rare thing that doesn't really happen so much.
And what
anymore.
kind of work are people even going to be doing in the future?
There's all sorts of things which this can change so dramatically. But we're trying to meet and answer problems while sustaining a problematic culture and system that is the problem. And so I think culturally, you would solve more problems by figuring out a way to solve the narcissism epidemic that's happening in this world than you ever would by trying to figure out what kind of way we should drive our car. because I think that driving the car is being answered by a narcissistic way of life. Like, and you go back to that airplane commercial you're talking about, where it's like, oh, you can have your own private room. It's just all about, worshiping the self, and the self-love, self-worship thing that's going on in our culture right now, which is, it has a certain amount of, it makes sense, but there's a certain amount of it which is problematic. And we become so secular, so like individualized, that we stop seeing the connectedness of everything. And so it creates a lot of problems. And then, it's not a simple answer, because you have other people out there who are trying to exploit and get power and manipulate the situation and take advantage of opportunities, and that's out there. So it's hard, because you have good-hearted people that want to make positive change, and then you have malevolent people who are power hungry, who are going to take advantage of those people with good hearts. And like, I think of it like in my journey, I would say I was kind of more like, why can't everyone just get along and like peaceful, in my younger years. And now in my older years, I'm like, hey, we got to watch out for these fuckers that are trying to take advantage of us, and it's just like, it's just part of life, right? You just, but like, what side of the spectrum? And the thing is like, I look at the innocent version of myself, who is kind of like, why can't we all just get along? And I see him getting taken advantage of by some of the people who, they're abusive of power. And so there's this part of me now that wants to kind of protect somebody like that from, those types of things. At the same time, I think we still need to look at a younger person's model of idealism and say, yeah, but that is kind of what we're after, isn't it? We are kind of after that.
Yeah.
And our older generation, who is trying to be more practical and realistic and mindful of the landmines and pitfalls of this world, we need to kind of be like, okay, let's be safe. Let's watch out. Let's not let the bad people get too much on us. But at the same time, let's not lose our idealism and our kind of like sense of connectedness and love and like getting along, right? And I'm not saying young people have it all together, but young people tend to be a little bit more idealistic because they haven't they haven't experienced the messiness of this world, right? And so that's one of the benefits of being young. But at the same time, as you get older, you start to see like, people aren't always honest. People steal. Sometimes people you think are good don't always do the good thing. And so that's why I think as you get older, you become a little bit more restrictive in your idealism, and you become a little bit more practical. But sometimes that shuts you down in your ability to be open to like dream and, expand. But anyway, I don't know, man. This has been an interesting talk. I don't know what we got here at the end, but big picture shit.
It definitely has been an interesting chat, that's for sure.
I think the thing is I'll say this before we share beer. It's just about thinking about things a little bit differently. If you get a little too minute in your focus, maybe open your mind, or maybe just see how your little focus is actually connected to something bigger than just what you think you're on, on about.
Mm-hmm. All right, Brandon. Tell me about this beer. You are the beer provider today.
Okay, so this one's from Persephone Brewing over in Sunshine Coast. And I don't remember the name, Evan. I went in and I tried a couple beers and I was like, oh, this one's real good. Give me that. And then I got into conversation, as we do at a craft brewery, which was awesome and part of the reason why I love craft breweries. And you guys should definitely go there because it's an amazing brewery. It's beautiful and it's awesome. Anyway, this is some kind of IPA, I think.
Yeah, it tastes like an IPA.
It had a good name too, but it's also kind of a rare, like they don't have it on all the time. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to try to do is try to figure out what it is this week, and maybe next week, if you're really interested in what we're drinking, I will try to mention it on next podcast. But no promises.
It's a really good IPA.
It's very good, yeah.
Really
very
good.
Very tasty, huh?
Yeah.
All right, man. All right. Well, I don't know. Do you got final thoughts?
Sure. I'll give final thoughts a shot. This has been really kind of maybe all over the place type of a conversation, but I think that something that has the big picture, trying to look at the big picture as its theme is probably in some ways bound to do a little bit of that thing, because like, well, what is the big picture? There's
Just
talk
always
about
gets bigger.
yeah, talk about philosophical questions, you know, that's one of them, you know, like, well, what is it? And we can talk about all kinds of different stuff, you know, like, is it, you know, we talked about environmental stuff and economics and power and spirituality and art, you know, like, it's, this conversation has taken us to all of these things, and the only thing that comes to mind is, you know, that's a big part of just what we're always doing on this podcast, or I think attempting to do, and why we do it, why we're motivated to even do it, is because we love engaging with these things. We love engaging with these big ideas and questions, and that's what an artist does, right? And you don't have to explicitly be an artist in order to be an artist, you know, like to engage with this stuff, because I think it's sort of one of the last bastions in which we do talk about big things, the biggest questions that we can imagine and think of. So I mean, I guess that's really all my final comment is, really
a bunch of stuff.
is to just to engage with that side of yourself, because I think that we just haven't been engaging. We don't do it enough, you know, like we've been convinced and or convinced ourselves that life is just that's the best way I think I can put it, is it's like, oh, life is just this. It's just doing this stuff, and it's just like this, and people are just like that, and it's all just we're all just a bunch of random atoms, you know, who've randomly shown up here, and just like all of this justing that is, I think, a very destructive part of the mentality of our culture. And I think that art and philosophy is, if not saying it just overtly that it's not just, or is at least asking, like, well, what if it's not just? What if it's not just this stuff? It's just a bunch of, you know, what if it's something quite more, something quite extraordinary, something that we can't quite put our finger on, something that, you know, like, because if you think about it, life is a very strange thing. It's a very strange thing. The older I get, the more sort of I have moments where I'm taken by that whole thing. I'm just like, whoa, this is so strange. Like, this is so strange, but in an extraordinary sense, that anything is here, that we're here, and it's baffling. It's baffling, and it's impossible to put into words, which is, again, part of what art is all about. Is let's try and find some way of talking about that, how baffling and extraordinary and heart-opening, heart-breaking, devastating, and celebratory, and like, it just, all of this stuff, you know, what is all of this in the most profound sense of what it is. So engage with those things and ask those questions, and I guess I've said it a few times, and I'll even say, like, you know, try really, if you've made it this far and maybe you've already been pondering the question a little bit, but, like, you know, like, what do you worship? What is the thing that you worship in your life? And really be honest with that. And if you don't like the thing that it seems that you do worship in your life, well, what is the thing? what is the thing that you actually really want it to be, and that you want your life to actually be about.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes we do, well, most of the time we end up doing a podcast, and by the end of it, we come up with some type of tidy way of wrapping it up. I mean, not super tidy, but it's usually like, okay, like that's what we talked about. This is what it is. And this one, I feel like, just opens the door to more questions, but maybe that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
And
that seems appropriate.
I would say that, like, if you're like looking at things and you're not loving it, look at the bigger picture. I would say that's like a good practice. It's like just open yourself from the tunnel that you're in, and like, if you're focused on yourself a lot, stop doing that, because that's minutely focused, and start focusing on the world as a whole. And I would say that it's like there's something practical about this, which is like, just see that there's more going on than you're aware of. And I think that immediately opens you up to a certain amount of humility and openness and flexibility and adaptiveness. And I think those are all good qualities, and they're all artistic qualities, by the way. So I think that's really good. I think if you go well, what's the big picture? I think you'll always find that there's probably even a bigger picture than the biggest picture you can put in your mind and figure out. So, you just kind of got to go well, if I'm getting too caught in the small stuff, maybe I look at the bigger thing and I see, for example, if you're doing something I don't know, here's a good example. I think if you have a habit you don't like that you do, instead of looking at how you enjoy it in the moment, focus on what would happen if you keep doing it for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of your life. What will happen? What will be the outcome of that? And really honestly do it. Do it with, full sincerity, and and feel what it would be like. And when you can see where things lead, you might be less inclined to do that thing in that moment that just feels good. And I do think there's a certain amount of this life which we're here to experience it how we want to experience it. And if you're doing something and it's making you happy, provided it's not hurting anybody else, hopefully not hurting yourself, at least not too bad. If you're enjoying it, I think it's good that you're enjoying it. And I think you should appreciate that. And I don't think there's necessarily any problem with enjoying stuff. But if you're looking at it and you're going, I'm enjoying this thing, but I can see that it's going to lead to great pain later, not just to me, but to people I love, to people I care about, and all of that, you might begin to transition your mind and to stop thinking about what feels good right now, and you might start thinking about what feels good in the larger picture of your life. And the thing is I think the big picture is good because I went through a depression. I've shared this a few times on the podcast, and the problem with depression when you're in it is the world is so immediate, and everything's now, and everything's horrible right now, and also there's this kind of looming will I ever get out of this? Is this my life now? Is I don't want to live in this hell. Almost you just want to end it. It's just terrible, right? And the thing is one of my answers to getting out of depression was to build a life beyond this pain that I could walk into once this was done. And I really think that's big picture thinking. Because there is no proof that I would ever get through it. By all accounts, I was stuck. It was done. My life was over. I was just a depressed person, and I should probably just start, fucking wrapping up in a bow, because it's done, man. And I was well, what happened, Evan? I was writing every day, and I still wrote every day, even though I was depressed. And I was well, there must be some spark of hope still inside of you that believes there's some reason to do this. Mm-hmm. And then I was well, what if there is? And so then I just started trying to live my life as though there was this life I was about to go into where I would look back on this depression and I would go, wow, that was an interesting time. And look, here I am. And I actually did it. And so, I would say that, like, big picture can get you out of a fucking mess. Because the mess you're in right now feels like it's your whole life, and it feels like everything, and it feels horrible. But like, if you're in a mess and it's horrible, but it will pass. And if you can see the big picture is, yeah, this will pass, and then I'll be on to this other life. And so I would say, big picture thinking, like in a practical step, maybe you could use, because I don't even know how to wrap this baby up, but I would just say this. Imagine your life and the lives of those you interacted with and touched as something more beautiful and better, not just after, but because of what you're going through today. And that will allow this moment to serve the next. And if you don't believe it, I'm living proof, because I was at that point where I didn't even know why I was carrying on the next day. I didn't even know why. And like, I don't know. Some point it just changed. And I just had some small, tiny glimmer of a better tomorrow. And look, it's tomorrow, and it's a better fucking tomorrow. Fucking way better. So if big picture is just tomorrow, or big picture is 10 years from now, or whatever, but like that to me is worth putting your mind on. Because if you're in pain right now, pain is inevitable. You'll just suffer about it if you focus on it. But if you focus on the life you're walking towards, I think if you keep focusing on it, you will eventually become the life you're walking towards, and you'll walk into that bigger picture, which this whatever pain you're in now will just be a distant memory.
Thank you for listening in on our conversation today. We hope you found something helpful that you can carry forward with you. Head over to our website, wayoftheartist.com, for more free exclusive material and learn about the show. If you haven't already, please support us by subscribing to the show, sharing it with people you know, and keeping compassionate, creative conversation going.